Hello, I'm Christain Fraser at Westminster, where Theresa May has just won a confidence vote of her MPs. 317 Conservative MPs casting a ballot this evening. We've just heard from the chair of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady. 200 Tory MPs voted in favour of the Prime Minister. 117 voted against her. There were cheers and standing ovations in the 1922 committee room for the Prime Minister, but when you look at that result, many will think that it is worse than they might have anticipated. A third of the Prime Minister's party do not have confidence in her. This was the result as announced by Sir Graham Brady just a few minutes ago.
The result of the ballot held this evening is that the parliamentary party does have confidence. Does have confidence in Theresa May as leader of the Conservative Party. The number of votes cast in favour of having confidence in Theresa May was 200 and against was 117. Under the rules set out in the constitution of the Conservative Party, no further confidence vote can take place for at least 12.
Sir Graham Brady addressing Conservative members just a short time ago. Well, let's cross to the lobby and speak to our chief political correspondent, Vicky Young. Vicky.
Yeah, and let's get some immediate reaction. As you could hear there, raucous cheering in the room there. But I think when the result came out, 117 voting against the Prime Minister, maybe a surprise there that was so high. Let's get some reaction from Cabinet Minister, Transport Secretary Chris Grayling and Conservative backbencher Vicky Ford. What's your reaction to that? I think some will be surprised. 117 do not have confidence in Theresa May's leadership.
Well, I think the way you have to look at this, she had more support tonight than she did in the last MP's vote in the leadership contest in 2016. And of course, this has been a difficult day for the Conservative Party. Of course, I would rather this hadn't happened, but the reality is the party, by a substantial margin tonight, has said we want you to carry on and do the job.
But the problem is, with 117 who don't have confidence in her leadership, how is she going to get her Brexit deal through? How are you going to get all that legislation through if it comes to it?
Well, she was very clear on Monday. She's got to deliver a package that will get through the House of Commons. That's self-evident. And it was very clear on Monday that that wasn't going to happen, and she needs to go back and work on this again. That has to happen. I hope that reassures those colleagues who voted against her this evening. But the reality was, this is a strong vote of support for the Prime Minister. More MPs supported her tonight than did in the leadership contest in 2016.
Jacob Rees-Mogg has said it's a terrible result for the Prime Minister. More than a third of her MPs voting against her. She should go straight to the Queen and resign.
Well, look, I think the party has said we want you to take us through Brexit. Of course, there are lessons for her, lessons for the party. This has hardly been an ideal day for the Conservative Party, but the party has voted very comfortably that it wants her to stay, wants her to take us through Brexit. And really now, that is the most important thing for this country. We've got to get through Brexit. We've got to take Britain out of the European Union on the 29th of March. We've got to fulfil the results of the referendum, and that's the priority now.
Just finally, what would you say to your colleagues, those Brexiteer colleagues who brought this in the first place, trying to oust her?
What I would be saying to my Brexiteer colleagues is that right now we've got to unify and make sure we deliver Brexit in March.
Vicky Ford, your reaction to that? Were you expecting it to be that high a number against the Prime Minister?
First of all, can I say, actually it's a huge sense of relief that this vote has now happened. It had been hanging over the Prime Minister, that uncertainty, for many weeks. But now the vote has happened. There cannot be another no confidence motion in her for another 12 months. And a win is a win. She's won tonight, and we need to take that as a mandate to go on and find a way through these incredibly complicated negotiations and discussions. She promised the 1922 committee and the backbenchers today, those who are concerned about this Northern Irish backstop, that she is working to find that solution, and that will be key to unlocking the next stage of this deal. Jeremy Corbyn's lost votes of no confidence, I think twice from his parliamentary party, and he's still sitting there in the front bench. The Prime Minister has won the vote tonight, and that puts that uncertainty to one side for at least a year. And we need to actually focus now on helping her, all of her team, find a deal that we can support, because actually we need to move past these discussions and be focused on other issues that the country is concerned about.
She felt the need tonight in that meeting with Conservative backbenchers to say she wouldn't lead you into a general election in 2022. Now that's because she said she acknowledged that there are many colleagues who don't want her to do that. Isn't there a problem? Once you say you're going, any authority you do have starts to ebb away. We saw it with Tony Blair, we saw it with David Cameron.
But I think we are in a very different situation now, because of course we have the fixed term parliaments, okay? So only she can call a snap election. She made it very clear that she's not going to do that, with no intention of allowing the government to fall. And so the election doesn't happen until 2022. And that actually, I think, gives some very sensible breathing space for us to look at the talent that is actually coming through in new generations in the Conservative Party as well. And to get on not just through this difficult next few months into the finalising the Brexit negotiations, finalising that, but also looking at the future and looking at the other issues the country is concerned about, because she also raised those issues. Reminding us that our constituents, actually they want to look at things like transport and roads and hospitals and schools and the other things that the government needs to be working on and is working on, but all the media focus gets sucked into this discussion about Brexit.
When it comes to the DUP, there are many saying that the DUP have effectively withdrawn their support. They've made it clear they do not trust Theresa May any longer. Isn't that a massive problem? Because they are giving her mandate to govern.
She made it very clear tonight that the issue that they have addressed around the backstop, that she wants to find a way to resolve that she's speaking to the European leaders, and that what we need to have before that vote comes back is not just, quote, warm words from Europe about not wanting to use it, but actually legal certainty. And she's made that very clear in the discussions in the 1922 tonight.
Vicky Ford, thank you very much indeed. And there were really mixed feelings about what Theresa May said about that election announcement, that she wouldn't lead them into 2022. There are some who don't think she should be the person who directs and leads all those negotiations that may be still to come about Britain's future relationship with the EU. We'll have to see how much pressure she comes under, especially with 117 of her own MPs not having confidence in her leadership.
Yes, interesting, but she remains the Prime Minister, Vicky, and she will go to Brussels, of course, tomorrow to that European summit to try and get something on the deal that she wants to put to the House of Commons. Let's get some reaction from over here on the green. With me is the Shadow Business Secretary, Rebecca Long-Bailey, and also the Conservative MP and loyalist, George Freeman is also with us. Nice to see you both. Rebecca, is that the end of the confidence motions, or is the Labour Party about to bring one against the government?
I don't think it changes anything in terms of the Prime Minister's position within Parliament. She'd already lost confidence across the floor of the House. She pulled her Brexit vote this week because she knew she didn't have the full support of her own MPs, never mind the rest of the House of Commons. So I find it very difficult to see how, unless she manages to get dramatic changes made to the withdrawal agreement, which doesn't seem to be the case because she's not changing any of her red lines, this deal that she has on the table will not go through Parliament.
We heard from the SNP earlier, who said they've been urging Jeremy Corbyn to push a confidence motion against the government, and he's sitting there with his fingers in his ears in a bunker mentality.
No, that's not true at all, and we've been working very closely with members across the House from all political parties to assess the best time to put forward a motion of no confidence.
So when is the best time?
Because, well, ultimately we want a successful outcome. I think lodging a motion of no confidence and not winning it might provide a little bit of parliamentary drama, theatrics if you like, that might make a few people feel better, but that won't secure the outcome that we want to see, which is a change in government so that we can secure a deal that puts our economy first. We don't have that at the moment, and it does not have parliamentary consensus, unfortunately.
George, to get some people to vote for her this evening, she's had to accept that she can't lead the Conservative Party into the next general election. There will be a lot of people say, well, does that mean that she goes in April or May when she's taken the UK out of the European Union? Because surely a successor has to come and then start leading the next bit of the process.
Well, I welcome her commitment. I called for it, and it was very moving to hear her say that she accepts that when she's got through delivering a Brexit withdrawal agreement, she's out of runway and somebody else should lead the party on. Look, I'm delighted tonight we're getting back to business. This was a potential distraction from the real challenge, which is what the British people want us to do, which is to get on and deliver a Brexit withdrawal agreement in accordance with the referendum result. And it's difficult. There is no easy solution, and Rebecca is a very good front bench politician on the Labour side. I suggest to her and my constituencies both voted leave. This isn't a party issue. There isn't a Conservative Brexit or a Labour Brexit. There is a national Brexit, and we need to get on and deliver it. We have our differences, but let's deliver what the people wanted, which is a sensible and orderly Brexit transition, and then have the debate about what we do to put this country back on its feet and to reunite this country. I want us to work together on this, and I think Jeremy Corbyn is playing a Brexiteer up north and a Leaver down south. And if he was Prime Minister tomorrow, he would face exactly the same challenges as the Prime Minister
I'm
does.
sure Rebecca would tell you that deal doesn't meet Labour's 6 tests. When you look at that figure, 117 that voted against the Prime Minister, that is broadly the number that were against the deal. I think we were at 109 on Monday when she pulled the vote. How on earth is she going to get this deal through the House of Commons when that number of people have no confidence both in her and the deal she's trying to get through?
Well, we all know the 6 tests are an excuse for Jeremy Corbyn to be able to say always, well, I can't agree with this. Look, he's waiting for this to fall into his lap. The bigger responsibility of a proper opposition, and I accept a government, I've been calling for us to pursue this in a cross-party way, is for us to find a Brexit that delivers for the majority of the British people. It won't satisfy everybody. I think there's a Brexit deal to be negotiated here in the next 2 months, and I'm delighted that we're now going to get back to work. A leadership election would have been a huge distraction, and whoever won it would have started where Theresa May starts tomorrow morning.
OK, we are out of time, sorry. Would love to speak to you more, but we must cross back to the lobby. Vicky Young has some guests with her there. Vicky.
Yeah, well, let's get immediate reaction from Mark Francois. He is part of the European Research Group, the Brexiteer wing of the party, I think it's fair to say. What do you make of that result? The Prime Minister has won and won quite easily.
Well, I wouldn't say that easily, because 117 of her colleagues have voted against her. That is over a third of the Conservative Parliamentary Party. That in itself is a pretty devastating verdict. And remember, the government payroll ministers and aides and such like is 140. So actually she lost well over half of the backbenchers. And, that's an extremely difficult position for any Prime Minister to find themselves in.
But because of the rules, she is now safe for a year. She cannot be challenged in this way for a year. So haven't you mistimed this challenge to her leadership?
No, because most of the pundits were saying we'd get about somewhere between about 60 and 80, and we've blown that clear out of the water. Over a third of her MPs have said they don't have confidence in her. That is a devastating verdict.
If she carries on, which she is perfectly entitled to do, she'll say she's won, and I'm sure she's about to tell us that now. What can you do?
Well, let us see what happens in the cold light of morning. Everybody's very excited. It's been a long day. It's a frenetic atmosphere. I think, in the cold light of day, when people reflect on that number, 117, it's a massive number, far bigger than almost anybody was predicting. I think that will be very sobering for the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, and then we'll have to take it from there. But if I were her, I wouldn't be pleased with this at all. Quite the opposite.
You think she should resign?
I think she needs to think very carefully about what to do now. For any Prime Minister to have a third of their MPs vote against them is pretty devastating. So I think everybody needs to sleep on it and think calmly. But she's clearly lost the support of the DUP. She's lost the support of a third of her colleagues, over half her backbenchers. It's an extremely difficult position for her from now on.
Okay, we'll be hearing from the Prime Minister very shortly. Mark Francois, thank you very much indeed. And I think that's what you're going to hear from a lot of Conservative MPs, that it was a victory, but one that leaves her weakened.
Vicky, thank you very much indeed. I've got Stephen Gethins from the Scottish National Party with me. He's their Europe spokesman. We just heard from Rebecca Long-Bailey. No clarity yet on whether they're going to call a vote of no confidence in this government, but of course you are urging them to do so.
Of course we are. Look, the Tories are utterly divided. That's pretty clear tonight when Theresa May's got almost 40% of her colleagues don't think she's fit to be Prime Minister. The Tories aren't fit to govern, and we're at a critical juncture for the whole country with decisions that will impact on people the length and breadth of the United Kingdom. The Tories are not fit to govern. It's a luxury, frankly, we can no longer afford, and it's time for them to step to one side. This is too important and impacts the lives of too many people for the Tories to be playing games with people's lives.
But perhaps he's not called it because we know, or it's been intimated by the DUP, that they would fall in behind the Conservative government. They would vote against the deal, but they would vote for them in a motion of no confidence. Perhaps he just sees the writing on the wall that there just isn't the numbers there for him.
Or maybe the only thing that the Tory government have got going for them is the most ineffective official opposition that we've seen for decades. We need Labour to step up to the plate. Come and join us. Come and join the SNP, the Liberal Democrats, the Green Party on taking on this government who are no longer fit to govern and need to step to one side.
So what happens when you approach the Labour leader's office, which I know you've been doing over the last few days? What sort of reaction do you get?
Well, look, we will engage with our colleagues in the Labour Party in a respectful way, and it is their decision to make. But we are at a critical time. This is an impact on people's lives, the length and breadth of the country. The UK is in crisis at the moment, and we're asking Labour to step up to the plate and join us.
But we come back to the point, as I say, there just aren't the numbers there, and I'm not sure what the purpose of it is.
Sure.
People out there in the country say we've had parlour games today, we need to get on. We've 107 days left, and here's the SNP calling for another vote of confidence, which they can't possibly
Christain,
win.
you're talking about games being played. The Tories are playing games. This is all about an internal Tory election that's going on. This is not just about the Conservative Party. David Cameron might have thought that when he called the referendum. Theresa May might think that at the moment. This impacts us all. It's a parliament of minorities, and that means each and every party has a role to play. And you see an effective government in Scotland, which is minority and delivering today with the Scottish budget, and you're seeing an ineffective government down in Westminster that's dragging us all over the cliff edge.
OK, Stephen Gethings, thank you very much indeed. We're bouncing back and forth. Let's go back to the lobby. Vicky Young's got some more reaction.
Well, Stephen Gethings there saying every party has a role to play, probably none more so than the Democratic Unionist Party, of course, in agreement with the Conservatives and giving them their majority. Let's speak to Nigel Dodds now. What do you make of this? Theresa May has won this leadership challenge to her. Does this mean she is now secure?
Well, it's a matter for the Conservative Party, and in terms of who should lead them, our focus has been on the withdrawal agreement and the changes that need to be made to it to get our support and the support of many other colleagues across the House of Commons. I don't think this vote really changes very much in terms of the arithmetic on that, and that's our concern.
Now, Arlene Foster had a long meeting today with the Prime Minister. Are you hearing anything about what the Prime Minister might be able to get from Europe about that backstop, that issue that you are so concerned about? I'm hearing that there are suggestions of some kind of legally enforceable reassurance.
Well, we had a good meeting with the Prime Minister today, about 45 minutes going over the various issues. She understands what I think our concerns are about the legally binding nature of the indefinite arrangements that we would be tied into and the difficulties that would pose for Northern Ireland. So whether or not she delivers anything that changes that remains to be seen. We will wait and see. The noises coming out of Europe, some of the member state governments don't sound too promising, but on the other hand, she has made commitments tonight to the 22 committee and to us. So we will wait and see. But she knows what has to be done, and that's hopefully what has now got through.
And do you and your party trust the Prime Minister? There are many going around, many Conservative MPs say that you have lost trust in her, and actually as long as she stays as leader of the Conservative Party, actually you can't really support the Conservative Party.
Well, what we would say is that in terms of trust, it isn't a question of trust, it's a question of what do we get into legally binding statute and legally binding treaties. So, the word of any Prime Minister or any politician of any side is not what's significant here, it's what's in legally binding agreements and treaties. And therefore, we have in the past heard commitments and pledges from the Prime Minister that haven't been lived up to in terms of the actions. So that's why, whatever she says, it's what's delivered in terms of the text that we'll be examining very closely.
And if the Labour Party were to hold a no confidence motion in the Conservative government tomorrow, how would your MPs vote?
Well, we wouldn't be supporting a no confidence motion. I think it would be illogical to do this while we still have to wait and see what the outcome of the work that the Prime Minister is now engaged in, and whilst we're still engaged in trying to get this withdrawal agreement change. Now, obviously, if the deal as currently proposed were to pass with the support of Parliament, then that would be a different situation, but we're not at that stage.
So if the Prime Minister were to change tack, if you like, and maybe try and get Labour votes behind a so-called softer Brexit, clearly that wouldn't be something you would go along with.
No, well, I mean, I don't think that that's likely or indeed possible. I think that the scale of the vote against her tonight illustrates the problems that she would have within her own party if she were to do that. And remember, there were people who voted for her tonight on the basis of her pledge that she would actually stand down at some point, and I think people would move very quickly if that were to happen.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So the view there from the DUP, crucial of course, because they have joined with the Conservatives in that agreement to make sure that they are able to govern.
Very much indeed. The Prime Minister did return to Downing Street to wait that result from Sir Graham Brady, which is announced in the last 15 minutes or so, and we are expecting some reaction from Number 10. We are expecting a statement from the Prime Minister, and of course we will take you to that immediately as it happens. But let's for the moment go to her constituency in Maidenhead in Berkshire, because Sarah Campbell is getting some reaction from the grassroots. Sarah.
Yes, indeed, Christian. I can tell you there was a huge cheer when that result came through around about 9 o'clock. Most of the people here, huge supporters of Theresa May. Of course, she's been MP here for 20 years or so. Many people have got to know her. They've worked with her. And you can say, has there been some anger, Richard Kellaway, chairman of the Maidenhead Conservative Association, at what she's had to go through this evening?
Yes, I think there has. I mean, in our office, most of the messages coming in are highly supportive of Theresa, and a feeling that it's pretty unnecessary to go through this just at this point in time of the Brexit negotiations.
You know her well. How do you think she'll take this result? So 200 in favour, 117 no confidence in her.
Yeah, but I think she'll be fairly happy with that. And bear in mind, most of the European leaders have far less of a mandate than she's had. And the last vote of no confidence in the House of Commons was against Mr Corbyn, who had 80% against him. So in terms of Westminster, it's not bad.
OK, Nahid Majid, Conservative supporter of Theresa May. What do you make to tonight's event?
I think it's a good result. It's unfortunate that we ever had to be in this situation to have a vote of no confidence. But now that we've got the right result, I hope she just carries on doing her job and persevering.
OK, thank you very much. I'm going to have to hand back to the studio, but huge support here for the Prime Minister.
Whilst I'm grateful for that support, a significant number of colleagues did cast a vote against me, and I've listened to what they said. Following this ballot, we now need to get on with the job of delivering Brexit for the British people and building a better future for this country. A Brexit that delivers on the votes that people gave, that brings back control of our money, our borders and our laws, that protects jobs, security and the union, that brings the country back together rather than entrenching division. That must start here in Westminster, with politicians on all sides coming together and acting in the national interest. For my part, I've heard what the House of Commons said about the Northern Ireland backstop, and when I go to the European Council tomorrow, I will be seeking legal and political assurances that will assuage the concerns that members of Parliament have on that issue. But while delivering Brexit is important, we also need to focus on the other issues that people feel are vital to them, that matter to them today, the issues that we came into politics to deal with. Building a stronger economy, delivering first-class public services, building the homes that families need. We owe it to the people who put us here to put their priorities first. So here is our renewed mission. Delivering the Brexit that people voted for, bringing the country back together, and building a country that truly works for everyone.
Can you get your Brexit deal through?
The Prime Minister speaking outside Number 10, saying that it is incumbent on Conservative MPs to help bring the country back together and putting their priorities first. Just a little bit of historical context. If you look back to the leadership contest in 1990 that Margaret Thatcher fall. In the first round of that ballot, she got 204 votes, so 4 votes more than Theresa May, and of course she resigned. Let's get some reaction then from Jacob Rees-Mogg, who was one of those, of course, who put in a letter of no confidence in the Prime Minister. There's 117 votes against the Prime Minister. That is much higher than some people had anticipated. I heard you in an interview earlier saying she needs to resign.
Yes, I think that's right. That it's well over half of the non-payroll vote. That, bear in mind, of Conservative MPs, about half, 163, are in receipt of a ministerial salary, their PPSs or their trade envoys. And therefore, if they're to oppose the Prime Minister, they ought to resign first. So this means that out of the remaining about 160, 117 voted against the Prime Minister. That is a huge vote against her. And I think your reference back to Margaret Thatcher, and you could say the same in 1975 about Ted Heath, they both came first in the vote, but they had to resign because it showed that there was sufficient unconfidence in them that the time had come for them to go.
But she would say, no doubt, there are 107 days to Brexit Day. This is a moment of national crisis. It would be hugely remiss of her to stand aside at this moment in time when the country needs her to get something through the House of Commons.
There is never a good time to change leader. This is one of those things that people always say when they want to stay in power. They say now is not the right time, the doctrine of unripe time. But actually, if you look at our history, we tend to change leaders during a period of crisis, because that's when you need somebody who can, as she was calling for, bring the country together. I don't believe Theresa May is that person, because it's gone too far against her, that her withdrawal agreement was too bad, it divided the DUP from the Conservatives, and this huge vote against her. Downing Street was briefing, as I understand it, that it was going to be about 70 votes against her. It's nearly 40 more than they expected. That is a really serious blow to her authority, and she only got that many votes for her by saying she would stand down, which undermines her authority even further. So I think the urgency of having a new leader is not reduced by today, it's increased.
You will be well aware that in an interview today, the Chancellor of the Exchequer called you and the other members of the ERG the extremists in the party, and he was happy to have this vote because he said it would flush the likes of you out. Is that the sort of language that is going to heal the party?
Well, the Prime Minister actually disassociated herself from the Chancellor's comments in the 1922 committee meeting. She said there are no extremists in the Conservative Party, and I think that was a much better tone for her to take. The Chancellor must reflect. There are 117 people who have no confidence in the Prime Minister, 117 who have been flushed out, the overwhelming majority of backbenchers. Does he really have such a low opinion of his colleagues?
You will be aware, though, that there are plenty of people in your party who are very angry today that you've called this vote. It was needless. They said you were never going to win it, and it was a needless distraction at a moment when she was supposed to be in Dublin today talking to the Taoiseach on the eve of a huge European summit in Brussels.
I'm afraid this misses the whole point. This came about because of the withdrawal agreement that the Prime Minister got, that she cannot get through Parliament. Our constitutional system requires a Prime Minister who can get her business through Parliament. On Monday she pulled the business, cancelled the vote, because as the Prime Minister herself said in her statement, there was going to be a big vote against it. Therefore we have a Prime Minister who is not commanding a majority in Parliament. She ought to make way for somebody who can.
If she was able to get some written assurances from the EU tomorrow, something that might have some legal force, I don't know what that might be, maybe a time date, an end date for the backstop, or maybe some idea that it would only be temporary. Is there anything that you could get behind that would get this deal through the House of Commons?
Be very careful of protocols. There's a protocol to the Lisbon Treaty, which you may remember, on the Charter of Fundamental Rights, and the government at the time said that meant the Charter of Fundamental Rights would not apply in the UK. This turned out to be false. So unless it's in the body of the text, unless it's in the heart of the treaty, it will not have,
and in the withdrawal agreement.
Absolutely, it will not have any effect. So basically what needs to happen is the backstop needs to be withdrawn. I think people could live with the withdrawal agreement minus the backstop. There are bits that I don't like of it, there are bits that I would quibble over, but as a compromise I would be able to accept.
But just to be clear, if it's not, and despite her urging Conservative MPs to get behind it for the priorities of the country, you would vote against it when it comes to the vote?
Unfortunately, the Prime Minister has said too many things that simply haven't then happened. So if she was to wave about a piece of paper and say, I've got a great concession and it's not a change to the text, nobody will think that is good enough. And to give her credit, in Prime Minister's questions today, Sorry, in the 1922 committee today, she said that if she'd just got a few warm words, that would be not enough. So the Prime Minister is saying that too, it's not just me.
Jacob Rees-Mogg,
Great pleasure. Thank you, nice
very
to see you.
Thank you. So there you go, Vicky. We've had some strong words from the DUP and also from Jacob Rees-Mogg. It's quite clear that assurances, clarifications from the EU, whatever she might be able to get in the next 2 days, that's not going to cut it with the ERG or with the Unionists, the DUP in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, and I think that's the point, isn't it, about today, is that it doesn't help with that other task of getting her deal through Parliament. And as one minister said to me, all the legislation they've got to get through, they will be extremely concerned that 117 MPs are willing to vote against her in a confidence motion. What does that say about the difficulties they're going to have governing in the coming weeks and months? Let's discuss all this a little bit more. I'm joined by the Conservative MP Simon Hoare. You voted for the Prime Minister. We were listening there to her, what she had to say. Can she just go on? She's got 117, more than a third of her party, who don't have confidence in her leadership.
She's had a strong and clear victory this evening. The vast majority of the Conservative Party has supported her and backed her. I thought the message that she gave on from Downing Street just now was a very clear one. But yes, we have to go and deliver Brexit, but we also have to now focus with greater energy, if you will, on the domestic agenda to deliver on issues that people want to see delivered and addressed. So I think, yes, work once again starts tomorrow. She's off to the European Council. I think that's the hallmark of the Prime Minister. She takes these hurdles very much in her stride, gets over them, and then just carries on with the task in hand. And whereas I think, lesser mortals will probably be sitting down with a mug of cocoa now and going, right, we can have the day off tomorrow. She'll be working on her red boxes, working on the paperwork, getting ready to go back to Europe to argue the case for the United Kingdom. So hats off to her for that.
Jacob Rees-Mogg has said that it's a terrible result for the Prime Minister and she should go and see the Queen and resign.
Well, I think that's unfortunately churlish of Jacob. The Prime Minister's percentage vote, if you wanted to look at percentage votes, is greater than the 52% that voted to leave the European Union. And yet we're told that that's a clear and compelling view of the British people. I think people in the party, both here in Parliament and in the country, and amongst the general public, will find losing with bad grace and churlishness and just being a bad sport is not what people expect. He's orchestrated this with some of his colleagues. He's got the ballot. We've had it. We have got the result. Let's now stop moaning and picking away at things. Let's come back, heal, unite, and deliver. But a place for a bad sport? No.
What did you make of Theresa May, though, when she said politicians on all sides need to come together in the national interest? Do you think she was just talking about your party, or do you think she's talking more broadly?
I think she's talking broadly, because I think it is now clear that there's a majority view in Parliament to leave, but to leave with a deal. There isn't a unanimity of view as to what that deal should look like. So I think one of the debates, or one of the issues which came out of the debates last week, was to engage the opposition parties and see if we can find a way forward. This doesn't change the fact that we are a minority government, and I would certainly be supporting her in an endeavour to build a coalition of women and men of goodwill across all parties who want to see Brexit delivered, who want to honour the referendum result, but want to do it in a pragmatic and sensible way. And if you look at the history of Parliament when we voted to join the EEC, if you look at the votes that we've had recently, whether it was triggering Article 50 or indeed the referendum legislation itself, all of that was passed with very significant majorities delivered on a cross-party basis. It shouldn't be seen as strange or perverse or weird to now work on a cross-party basis on delivering the exit strategy. And I think if all of us come together and work towards that, then I think that will restore a confidence which is slightly lapsed in the general public, that we as politicians are here serving in the national interest, not in narrow either self or party interest. And I think that would probably be the right approach.
Okay, Simon Hall, thank you very much. Let's bring in Brandon Lewis, the chairman of the Conservative Party. There are some saying actually 117 of the MPs voting against their leader. This is a terrible result for the Prime Minister. Jacob Rees-Mogg says she needs to go to the Queen and resign straight away.
Look, we've had a vote. and we should respect that vote. It's exactly what we were saying about the Brexit vote as well in 2016. We've got to respect the vote. The Prime Minister in 2016, actually the vote she got tonight is a bigger number than she got when she won the leadership in 2016. Actually, I think the focus now has to be on going forward, delivering on Brexit, on that 2016 vote. The Prime Minister will be flying out to Europe tomorrow to try and get that deal that we can get through Parliament, and also back focused on the day job. We're making sure we're also delivering good job opportunities, good schools, a strong NHS that can deliver for people, all of those domestic issues that matter so much to all of us every day.
Aren't you worried that with more than a third of the party voting against her, what that says about how you're going to govern in the coming weeks and months, with incredibly contentious legislation presumably coming forward if she gets the deal through Parliament? How is that going to work when you have so many angry people in your party who are so upset about the policy she's trying to bring through with Brexit?
Well, she's got over 63% of the vote. That's a phenomenally high figure, and as I say, a bigger vote than she got when she won the leadership in 2016. There's no secret in the Conservative Party we've been discussing and debating Europe for a very, very long time. This is a complicated, emotive issue for people across the country of all political parties, and we've got to find a way through this. We as a parliament, we as a country, have got to find a way to come together, deliver on Brexit. We've got to respect that referendum and do so in a way that's good for the UK. That is what the Prime Minister is and will be focused on.
Is she willing to reach out to other parties, to the Labour Party, in order to get this deal through? She talked about politicians on all sides coming together in the national interest. Is that going to be her message now?
Well, we saw PMQs today. The opposition and Jeremy Corbyn very clear they're just going to vote against whatever the Prime Minister brings back. And I've been clear, and the Prime Minister has been clear over the last few weeks. All of us as MPs have got to look at the deal when it comes back and think about what is in the national interest, how we deliver Brexit, respecting that referendum vote, and do it in a way that does make sure we can deliver good job opportunities and a good strong economy in the future.
And is she confident she can get enough from Brussels in order to try and appease some of those in her own party who want reassurance on this issue of the backstop?
Well, Prime Minister will be flying out to Europe tomorrow. She's been out this week talking to leaders around Europe, back out to the European Council tomorrow, working to get that deal and to get a deal that delivers for the United Kingdom.
Okay, Randall Lewis, thank you very much indeed. So that's the message from the Cabinet and from some of her MPs at least, but there will still be some who say it can't just be business as usual now.
No, and that's certainly the message that we got from Jacob Rees-Mogg a short while ago. Vicky, thank you very much. If you are just joining us, let's just remind you of the result. There were 317 Conservative MPs that cast a vote tonight. 200 of them voted for the Prime Minister. 117 voted against it and said they had no confidence in it, which is a slightly higher number than some were anticipating. Nonetheless, this was the scene in her constituency in Maidenhead a little earlier.
The ballot held this evening is that the Parliamentary Party does have confidence.
So some happy people in Maidenhead this evening. Adam Fleming is in Brussels for us. He's been watching events here in Westminster, as I'm sure Adam have many of the European leaders, and tomorrow they'll gather there in Brussels. Is there anything that they'll have seen here today that will make them want to offer a little bit more to the British Prime Minister?
All I'll say is I was in the pub earlier having some fish and chips and everyone was watching the football, not, unfortunately, your excellent programme, Christian. So I think it's maybe not the biggest news in Brussels today. And that's because they knew that this was a bit of a sideshow. From this morning, they thought the signals were that the Prime Minister would win this leadership challenge. So they continued on the assumptions that the summit tomorrow of EU leaders would see Theresa May coming here, representing the UK as the Prime Minister, the sitting Prime Minister, not the Prime Minister who is going anywhere. And the fact is, I think it will be back to business as usual, if not tonight, first thing tomorrow morning. And business as usual at the moment is all about these assurances that Theresa May is seeking about the Brexit deal, the withdrawal agreement, and specifically the Northern Irish backstop, that insurance policy for ensuring that there's no hard border in Ireland, which has infuriated so many of the Brexiteers that voted against her in that contest today. Now, the EU is clear on a couple of things. They say the text of the agreement, the treaty, is closed. It is not up for renegotiation. What they are up for is clarification. So documents that sit alongside the withdrawal agreement, perhaps conclusions signed by EU leaders that are a bit like the minutes of their meetings, which to some people might not be legally binding, but they're certainly politically binding because all the leaders sign up to them and then give them to us in the media, and they're published for everyone to see. So the question is, how far can the EU go politically that helps Theresa May sell the deal in the Commons, while still sticking to their legal red lines and not changing the content of the actual agreement itself?
I get that, and they get it loud and clear over here in London, Adam, but this has to be ratified by both the Westminster Parliament and by the European Parliament, and right now there is no sign whatsoever that they're going to approve this vote. So you and I are veterans of watching these summits in Brussels. Is there something in the bottom drawer that perhaps after a vote here in London, that they are going to pull out to save the deal? Because if they don't, then you wonder what happens next.
So the first thing there is that the number that the EU is totting up is not the number of MPs that voted against Theresa May tonight. They've got a sort of mental running total of how many MPs in Parliament would vote for the final deal, because this deal has to get through Parliament in Westminster. I know it's so obvious, but it bears saying. And the reason it bears saying is because that is the fundamental problem. And that's the other thing that the EU sources and diplomats and officials and civil servants have been saying to me today. The problem in the UK is not one of leadership. It's the fact that Parliament is split over what kind of Brexit deal it can sign up to. Similarly, this isn't the Prime Minister's Brexit deal that's on the table. It's a deal that was signed by the whole Cabinet in November. And also, as I think they're going to reinforce tomorrow, this is the only deal on the table. There was not some mythical better Brexit deal out there that could be negotiated by some mythical better Prime Minister. So for all the drama where you've been, and it has been incredibly dramatic, and that number of people who are prepared to put a cross in a box saying they don't like their own party leader is of course very significant. But actually none of the fundamentals when it comes to Brexit have changed at all today. Slightly disappointing for everyone who's lived through it, I know.
We'll let you go, Adam. You've got a busy day tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed. Let's cross to the city and speak to Simon Jack. So I would imagine, Simon, that the pound would be a little bit more robust this evening, knowing that Theresa May is still in office, but perhaps we might see it fall again tomorrow because of what Adam has just told us.
I think that's exactly right. Now, business groups are calling this, my favourite line from the many, is a chaotic detour. And it does feel a bit like you're in a car chase and the lead car has gone off through a barn, lots of chickens come out the windows squawking, and then you get back on the road only to find out that the car that was chasing you is still chasing you, because we are essentially, as Adam says, back where we were at the beginning of this week, with a deal on the table that no one thinks anyone likes enough to get through Parliament. That is causing great consternation for business. She's kicked the vote on that deal, of course, into the new year. That's when the pound began to wobble. Funnily enough, today, as the markets were taking MPs at their word and she was going to win this, the pound started to recover. But there's a famous adage in these parts in the city, which is buy the rumour and sell the news. And I think there is a growing realisation that, as we said, chaotic detour, but we are back on the same road that we were before. And businesses are saying they're tearing their hair out. It's very hard to plan. Those that can are letting inventories build. Some are trying to manage their cash flows. They're getting licenses in order, because a lot of them are saying that by the time we get to this vote before January the 21st, if it even happens then, that'll be very much in what one supermarket executive told me was squeaky bum time, channeling Sir Alex Ferguson there. And they have to make some tough decisions about which suppliers they think are going to be robust enough to get through a potential no deal. So, chaotic detour, we're pretty much back on the same road we were, and it's not a very scenic tour. It's one full of uncertainty, which is businesses finding it almost impossible to plan for.
And you've been going around the country, Simon, speaking to business. I mean, this is broadly a deal that they could get behind. There is support within the business community for what the Prime Minister's put on the table.
I would say 80... Now, listen, not all businesses are anti-Brexit. Almost all of them, I would say 99.9%, are anti-no deal. And the existential problems that no deal caused for many of them say that even though they don't like this deal in its entirety, they think it's not perfect, they would think that, listen, at least there is something we can hang on to, something we can focus on, something we can plan around. So I think that business broadly is supportive of this deal, but they also realise that the parliamentary arithmetic is pretty gruesome, and so they are having to plan and triggering contingency plans for the fact that they might not get one. And I think that those The audible sound of those contingency plans really clicking into motion happened on Monday when the Prime Minister said, listen, we're not going to have this vote because we're looking at certain defeat. At that point, you're kicking into the new year. At that point, you're not very far away from March the 29th. Funnily enough, there was a lot of people saying that if she had lost tonight, there was a chance that the pound, which is the canary in the confidence coal mine, might have rallied, because David Gauke, the Justice Minister, I'm sure you've been talking about today, said in those circumstances you would have to pause Article 50, everyone takes a breath, you stop hurtling towards what business considers a cliff edge, and everyone can breathe a little easier. It's not clear where we are at the moment, but I'm saying that most businesses, the big businesses like these banks behind me, they've been planning for no deal from day one. They think that's the only responsible thing to do, and they're in a pretty good place. They think they can serve their customers on the 1st of April with some of the measures they've taken, but not many businesses are in that position.
Simon Jack in the City, good to get your thoughts. Thank you very much indeed. With me here is the Conservative MP Stephen Crabb. Simon was just saying there that in the City they buy the rumour, they sell the news, and the news is we're back to square one.
Yeah, it feels a bit like that. I think today didn't change anything fundamentally. It was a huge distraction, a diversionary tactic from the main business in front of us, which is trying to make headway through what is a really complicated, difficult challenge of delivering Brexit in a responsible and sensible way that protects the UK economy, protects key industries like manufacturing, but actually does deliver clearly on the referendum outcome from 2016. And we've still got some very, very difficult days ahead.
Yeah, but Sam was also saying that they've all got their contingency plans in place now. They know that they have to start pressing some of those contingency plan buttons in the new year. Time is running out for them. The vote's been pulled. She's talking about before January 21st. How much longer can she delay before she puts it to the House of Commons?
Not much longer, and the 21st of January is the really hard deadline, but you're quite right, and a lot of the businesses I speak to, there's been a growing sense of frustration. They want more clarity, they want more certainty. They don't want to be in the position where they're having to press those contingency buttons, but many of them are, because we don't know what the outlook will be. And now we have a responsibility. We're the party in government, the Conservative Party. Our responsibility is to avoid this kind of scenario. We're elected to provide that certainty and get the country moving forward in a clear and specific way. And I think what colleagues need to reflect on in the days ahead is, are we still going to be in business as a party, as the governing party, trying to move the country forward, or are we just as a mass going to put up our hands and say it's all too difficult for us, I'm sorry, we actually can't do government?
I would suggest to you it's the latter, because we just had Jacob Rees-Mogg standing where you were a few minutes ago, and he says she needs to go to the Queen and resign.
Well, he would say that because he was one of those.
But there are 117 others who have no confidence in the Prime Minister, not to mention a deal.
Yeah, we're a very, very divided party, and no one should pretend that if there was any other political party in government at the moment, certainly not the Labour Party, they wouldn't be hugely divided as well, because look outside of SW1, the country is deeply divided, and that's what we are wrestling with. We had a clear referendum outcome in 2016. We promised solemnly to implement that and take Britain out of the EU. But there are different ways to do that, and what the Prime Minister has opted to do is to do it in a careful, phased way, with a transition period, with clear agreements that guarantee citizens' rights for Brits living in Europe and for European nationals living in the UK, but also getting clarity on the trading rules, which is the really important thing that business wants. And the option in front of us will still be, come the end of January, do we do a pragmatic compromise deal now, move us to the next phase of negotiations, or do we risk that the lack of clarity of a no deal? Or do we just put our hands up and say, you know what, this is all too difficult for British politicians now, let's pass the ball back to the British public, let them argue about it again in a second referendum?
I know you were in the committee room this evening when she made her private comments to Conservative MPs. Today she's had to concede that she can't lead the party into the next general election, but she was asked, I know, pointedly, when she's going to go. I mean, goodness me, we're putting the cart before the horse here. We haven't even got to Brexit Day yet, but surely the power is now going to start to ebb away, even more than it has over the last few weeks. She cannot lead the country through the next process of Brexit, if we get to that, after what she said today.
We'll see how events play out, and one thing Theresa May has demonstrated over and over again is her survival skills and her resilience, and she showed that again today, coming through this latest experience. Now, I'll tell you that the private conversation amongst many MPs in recent months was that when we get to that end of March date next year, which is the legal date for taking Britain out of the EU, and then that moves us into the next phase of negotiations, that always felt to many MPs, including myself, like a natural point that we would be looking for a new leader to take us forward for the next phase and then to prepare for the general election.
So she won, but she's got 3 months.
Well, we'll see how events play out. You know, this government...
It's pretty much the message I've heard from other MPs tonight.
This government is operating on a week-to-week basis at the moment. There's no point in me standing here and pretending to you that we've got this kind of clear long-term plan that we're executing. We are trying to deliver a really difficult, complicated thing, Brexit, by the end of next March. We don't have an overall majority in the House of Commons, and we're also deeply divided, as today's vote demonstrates. So look, it's really hard, but Theresa May has demonstrated time and time again that she's tough, that she cares about the country, and that's really come through today. The number of emails and phone calls I had coming into my office saying, for goodness sake, we hope you're going to back the Prime Minister. I think that she still has the goodwill and the support of the country.
Stephen Crabb, grateful for your time. Thank you very much for coming. Well, let's just remind you, if you are joining us, that the Prime Minister has won that vote of no confidence this evening, 200 votes to 117. And a short time ago, she came out onto the steps of Downing Street and she gave this statement.
This has been a long and challenging day, but at the end of it, I'm pleased to have received the backing of my colleagues in tonight's ballot. Whilst I'm grateful for that support, a significant number of colleagues did cast a vote against me, and I've listened to what they said. Following this ballot, we now need to get on with the job of delivering Brexit for the British people and building a better future for this country. A Brexit that delivers on the vote that people gave, that brings back control of our money, our borders and our laws, that protects jobs, security and the union, that brings the country back together rather than entrenching division. That must start here in Westminster, with politicians on all sides coming together and acting in the national interest. For my part, I've heard what the House of Commons said about the Northern Ireland backstop, and when I go to the European Council tomorrow, I will be seeking legal and political assurances that will assuage the concerns that members of Parliament have on that issue. But while delivering Brexit is important, we also need to focus on the other issues that people feel are vital to them, that matter to them today, the issues that we came into politics to deal with. Building a stronger economy, delivering first-class public services, building the homes that families need. We owe it to the people who put us here to put their priorities first. So here is our renewed mission: delivering the Brexit that people voted for, bringing the country back together, and building a country that truly works for everyone.
But can you get your Brexit deal through?
Theresa May speaking outside Downing Street not a short time ago, determined as ever, determined to carry on, and tomorrow we'll go to Brussels to speak to the other 27 European leaders. Joining me is Andrew Bridgen, one of those who put in a letter of no confidence in the Prime Minister. You just heard, I know you were standing there listening to Stephen Crabb, he's someone who's voted for her. And even he admits that the other side of March she has to go, so it's a bit of a hollow victory.
Yes, I think it was a huge opportunity missed to reset our negotiations with the European Union with a new Prime Minister. And to coin a phrase the Prime Minister's used herself, nothing's changed. The vote tonight has not solved any of the problems the government faces. It doesn't make it any easier to get the withdrawal agreement through. It doesn't get concessions from the European Union. It doesn't get the DUP back on board to restore our majority in the House of Commons. And without a majority, how is the government going to function moving forward?
So, deadlock?
It's deadlock, it's stalemate, unless you think that any time soon Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party is going to come to the rescue of the Prime Minister and vote through her deeply flawed withdrawal agreement, which can barely get 20% of the population in UK to support it.
If he brings a vote of no confidence in this government, he doesn't have the numbers without the DUP, but he might have the numbers if some Conservative MPs go across and join him. Do you think it's likely that some Conservative MPs would do that?
I hope not. For all the disputes in
so
the Conservative...
your group wouldn't go across and vote and do that?
I can't speak for any other Conservative MP, but I would not join Labour in a vote of no confidence against the government, because whatever you think about the options for Brexit, or your fears might be of a certain deal or no deal or staying in, the danger of a Jeremy Corbyn government is is on a quantum scale far worse than that as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, but obviously this is not the end of it, as you say. That confidence motion may come. If she wasn't to win that, we could be back in this position in even within the next fortnight.
Well, the Prime Minister's conceded at the 1922 committee meeting that she was not going to lead us into the next general election in 2022. That's if this Parliament ran full term. Minority governments don't generally run full term, but if we've lost the confidence and supply agreement with the DUP, the timing of the next general election may be on a confidence motion against the government, which we might lose, in which case the Prime Minister might not have control of when the next general election is, and it might be very soon.
Andrew Bridgen, thank you very much indeed for your time. It is 10 o'clock. You're watching a BBC News special here in Westminster. If you're just joining us, a reminder of the result here this evening. Theresa May is still in power. She has won a confidence vote. 317 Conservative MPs cast a ballot this evening. 200 of them were in favour of Theresa May, and 117, nearly a third of the party, voted against her. Where does that leave her? There'll be plenty more reaction coming in the coming hours and the next few days, you would think. A difficult few days for Theresa May as well, because she heads, of course, to Brussels to talk to the other 27 leaders. Well, let's show you the moment that the result was announced by the chairman of the backbench 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady.
The result of the ballot held this evening is that the parliamentary party does have confidence. Does have confidence in Theresa May as leader of the Conservative Party. The number of votes cast in favour of having confidence in Theresa May was 200, and against was 117. Under the rules set out in the constitution of the Conservative Party, no further confidence vote can take place for at least 2 months.
Sir Graham Brady announcing the result a little earlier. With me is our colleague Naomi Grimley, who's been watching events for us today. Quite dramatic things that we've been hearing from people who've been joining us here. We just heard from Andrew Bridgen, who said nothing has changed. They wanted to resign. Even Stephen Crabb, who's a loyalist and voted for her today, saying, look, the other side of March, she has to go. It's a pretty hollow victory.
Absolutely, and the fact remains for her that the arithmetic in Parliament is stacked against this compromise deal that she wants to get through. And yes, she put it off till after Christmas. She doesn't have to come back to the House of Parliament until January. But nevertheless, it's just not looking like she will get the concessions from Brussels she needs to buy off these critics. And what we've learnt tonight is that they're pretty determined, and there are more than we perhaps thought.
Yeah, and of course you've got the Labour Party plotting as well with the other opposition parties, wondering if they can get the numbers to vote this government out. I mean, we could be in a position where she has to go anyway if she was to lose a confidence vote like that.
Absolutely, that's another thing. I should think she is very much looking forward to Christmas, because at least she can buy herself a little more time. But it's very hard to get away from this view that politics is in some kind of dysfunctional state. There is paralysis here at Westminster. And yes, she'll try and go back to Brussels, try and get some kind of concession, but I don't think it's going to help her. Remember, also, she's not only got to get that meaningful vote through the Houses of Parliament, she's also supposed to get legislation through on the withdrawal, and she has to do that before the end of March. How she's going to do it with all this happening remains to be seen.
And it just doesn't stop for the Prime Minister, does it? Because she's had a very difficult day here today. She's had to cancel her trip to Dublin, where she was going to see the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar. But tomorrow she's going to face the music in Brussels. And there is a certain amount of irritation over there that she didn't call this vote.
Yes, I think that's true. She's both there and here. In some ways, the fact that she pulled the vote has just meant that she's faced all this trouble, because many people said it's cowardice. It's also shot to pieces her credibility in many ways. And really, she's still going to have to face that reckoning at some point. So it's really putting off the inevitable.
But having said that, there is a series of bad options here for the Prime Minister. Pick whichever one you want. And we've been out into the country today and tonight, listening to the members in Sale, and there is a certain amount of sympathy out in the country for the way she plugs on, the determined nature of the Prime Minister.
Yeah, I mean, of course, her critics would say it's stubbornness, but I think that is true, that her proponents can spin it as being resilient, as she gets knocked down and she stands back up again. And of course, to be a politician at the top of your game, you need that.
She is nothing if not resilient. Naomi, lovely to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Well, that's almost it from me. In a moment, viewers in the UK will be able to watch, of course, the 10 o'clock news, which is coming right up. And on BBC World, my colleague Babita will be here, and she will take you through the events of the evening. But let's just pause and just look back at the result tonight. 200 votes in favour of the Prime Minister, 117 against her. That's almost a third of a party. Very difficult day for the Prime Minister, and they get even harder from here.